I will turn things over to you. I want to welcome everyone who I see having logged in. And Tori, I turn it all over to you.
Great, thank you so much. So my name is Tori Kenelopoulos. I'm a senior planner with community development in Albemarle County. So I do have a few things that I'll need to read over before we get started with the agenda. So this meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Emergency Ordinance number 20-A14, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The committee members who are electronically present at this meeting are Dottie Martin, Tim Novak, Mary Sandiford, and Ann Herod. County staff in attendance for this meeting are Carolyn Schaefer and Tori Kenelopoulos. Also present are Commissioner Rick Randolph and Supervisor Donna Price. Responsible for receiving public comment are the Village of Rivanna Community Advisory Committee. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County calendar. So with that, I can give a brief overview of the agenda this evening. So we'll start with a CAC overview presentation for new and returning members, and then an overview of the county's development dashboard tool, and then liaison updates from the commission and board liaisons. Then at the end of the meeting, if there's time, we can discuss potential topics of interest for future CAC meetings. And one of those will be elections, which I believe we will actually be able to do in January at the next meeting. But for this meeting, since there are more than 3 members present, is there anyone who would like to volunteer to take meeting minutes? They can be really brief, just bullet point notes from the meeting.
Dottie usually likes to do that. I don't know if she's still interested.
Well, if not, that's okay. I can take some brief meeting minutes during the liaison updates, and then I'll just include my presentation for the rest of it. I think that should be detailed.
Can you guys, can you hear me?
Oh, yep, now I can.
Okay, I would take minutes.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
I'm here. This is the best I can do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dottie.
All right.
Great. So I am going to share my screen for the presentation. So hopefully that will come up. Is everyone able to see that okay?
Yes.
Okay,
yep.
Great.
You can see it.
Great. So good evening, everyone. I'm the planning staff liaison for the Village of Rivanna CAC. Will briefly cover the purpose of CACs and the CAC requirements, including procedures and FOIA. This information was also covered in the welcome packets that were emailed out last week, and I'm happy to answer any questions during this meeting, or you can also email me if questions come up later. So CACs have several roles, which include holding community meetings for rezonings and special use permits, assisting with master plan updates and new small area plans, and assisting with implementation and decision-making for special projects such as capital improvement projects. The CACs are an important venue for discussion and providing feedback, although CACs do not have a legislative role in the development process. CACs may also serve as a public engagement tool by keeping their community informed of current projects and applications, and providing information at CAC meetings about topics of interest or concern in their community. The current CACs include the 5 development areas in the county, and there are 7 total, since there are 3 for the Places 29 area, as this covers a large geographic area and population. The rules and procedures are the same for all the CACs, as are the purpose, roles, and responsibilities. The number of members and lengths of term vary by CAC. The Village of Rivanna CAC typically meets on the 2nd Monday of every other month in the training room at the East Rivanna Fire Station. Meetings will continue to be held virtually for the foreseeable future, and county staff will keep the CACs updated if the meeting locations are revised. Typically, the chair of the CAC would coordinate the agenda with staff and would email out the agenda to the CAC at least 3 business days prior to the meeting. The secretary of the CAC would take minutes. And while these roles are currently unfilled for the Village of Rivanna CAC, the CAC should be able to hold elections at the next meeting to fill these positions. The Village of Rivanna CAC may have up to 10 members. Each member is appointed to a term of 2 or 3 years. Members may serve 2 consecutive terms, and after initial appointments, terms will be for 2 years. Additional terms may be considered by the Board of Supervisors. The CAC also includes Commissioner Rick Randolph as the Planning Commission liaison and Supervisor Donna Price as the Board of Supervisors liaison. The Planning Commission and Board liaisons give updates as needed from Commission and Board meetings on topics and projects that may be of interest to the group. A majority of appointed CAC members must be present to establish a quorum, which is required to elect officers. Typically, the Village of Rivanna CAC elects the chair, vice chair, and secretary at its April or May meeting, as new members are usually appointed in April, but given circumstances and schedule changes with COVID, elections for the CACs may vary this year and next year. The Village of Rivanna typically meets on the second Monday of every other month. CACs may meet more or less frequently as needed, depending on current topics and projects. The CACs also typically have 1 yearly joint meeting. The typical agenda structure is to call the meeting to order, approve minutes from the previous meeting, have a scheduled presentation, which may be from county or other staff, have commission and board updates, and finally any other business, such as discussion of potential future agenda items. For the purposes of the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, a meeting occurs when 3 or more members of a CAC meet for the purpose of conducting business. Agendas for CAC meetings must be sent out and posted online at least 3 business days prior to the meeting. CAC meetings are open to the public. Minutes must be taken during meetings and include the date, time, location, members present and absent, and a summary of the discussions. Please note that per FOIA, emails may also be considered meetings when 3 or more members are discussing, especially if the discussion is in real time and is becoming detailed. For example, sending out agendas or replying with topics of interest would not be a meeting. However, if 3 or more members were emailing back and forth to draft a memo, that would likely be considered a meeting and should not be conducted via email, but could be discussed at the next CAC meeting. The state of Virginia requires localities to have a comprehensive plan for the development of their city or county and requires it to be reviewed every 5 years. The 5-year updates may be either an update to 1 chapter or section of the plan, or maybe a full revision. The comp plan also contains the master plans and small area plans. Therefore, the Village of Rivanna master plan is a part of the comp plan. Comp plans and master plans are guiding documents that contain the vision and goals for the community. The plan is organized by chapter, and each chapter contains specific goals, which are supported with objectives and strategies to implement the goals. One of the components of the county's comp plan is the growth management policy, which directs new development to the 5% of the county's land that is within the designated development areas and reserves the remaining 95% of the land as rural area. Development in the development areas is expected to meet the 12 neighborhood model principles, which are outlined in the comp plan and include a variety of housing types and affordable housing, walkability and multiple modes of transportation, and relegated parking. The Village of Rivanna Master Plan was adopted in 2010 and updated in 2015. The master plan covers the Village of Rivanna development area, which includes Glenmore and Rivanna Village. Each master plan designates future land use categories for all projects within its development area, which include recommended uses and densities. Master plans also include proposed projects and improvements to implement the master plan, such as road improvements or new parks. Unlike comp plans and master plans, the zoning ordinance is not a guiding document, but is a regulatory document and a local ordinance. Requirements in the zoning ordinance must be met, although some are permitted to be waived either by staff, the commission, or the board. The zoning ordinance contains a variety of zoning districts. Some are entirely residential, commercial, or industrial, while others are mixed use. The zoning district of a property regulates the permitted uses and the form and density of buildings on the site, such as height, setbacks, and the maximum number of units. There are 2 main types of development review: administrative and legislative. Within the administrative reviews, there are several types of submittals, including site plans, subdivision plats, and easement plats. Site plans and subdivision plats can only be approved for uses allowed by right. And if a use is not allowed by right, a rezoning or special use permit approval is needed prior to plan or plat approval. If a use is allowed by right and the application meets all county and state requirements, staff cannot legally deny the application. A rezoning is required if a proposed use or density is not allowed by special use permit or by right. A rezoning changes the zoning district of a property to an entirely different district. For example, rezoning from R1 residential to R15 residential. A special use permit is required if a use is specifically allowed by special use permit in a zoning district and does not change the zoning district of the property if approved. Rezoning may have application plans and proffers to address impacts, while special use permits may have application plans and conditions to mitigate impacts. Staff reviews rezonings and special use permits and writes a staff report with a recommendation. The Planning Commission holds a public hearing and provides a recommendation, and the Board of Supervisors holds a public hearing and votes to approve or deny the application. The CAC's role is to host the community meeting, ask questions of the developer to understand what is proposed, and weigh in on consistency with the comprehensive plan. So that concludes this presentation. Happy to take any questions or allow for any discussion. Thank you.
No questions.
Good overview.
Yeah, I have a question. Am I on?
You're on.
Yeah, so apparently our area is due an update on master plan this year, 2020, correct?
That would be true per the, the goal timeline. However, for most CACs, it ends up being longer than that before there's an update. And for the next update, there's a possibility that the comprehensive plan will be the focus update, and some of the other master plans may have to wait a bit longer.
Oh,
I think we were due for an update last year or the year before, but there wasn't much going on. Breezy Hill hadn't surfaced yet. And we were deferred, and I think you picked up Crozet instead. Does anybody remember that?
I do.
okay. I ask because it occurs to me that maybe that potentiality might, blend into Breezy Hill.
Exactly.
See, it might really create a concurrence, or whatever the word is I'm trying to say. Okay. I'll mute.
Any other questions? If not, I can go ahead and do the development dashboard overview as well. So let's see. Does that show up again okay for everyone? Okay, great.
Yep.
So the following presentation will cover the development dashboards, which is a tool used to show projects that are in the county's development pipeline and allow projects to be organized by development area. The development dashboard tool is found on the county's website. It's hosted by Microsoft Power BI, and the dashboard shows both administrative review and legislative review applications. If you scroll down on the main page for the development dashboard site, there's a list of maps and resources. The user's guide is helpful for learning how to use the dashboard and all of its features. The maps are organized by development area. And there's also the 2019 Growth Management Report, which includes a summary of development and projects in the pipeline for the village of Rivanna. So this is the most recently updated map for the village of Rivanna development area. Projects filled in blue are currently under construction, including Glenmore Phase K2C2. Projects filled in orange are under site plan review, including portions of village of Rivanna Village. Projects outlined in orange and not filled in are under legislative review, including the rezoning application for Breezy Hill. You can start with the areas at a glance page to see an overview of all administrative and legislative review projects in your area. You can filter by CAC area, as well as by magisterial district, school district, and development areas or rural areas. Please note that currently data must be updated manually by staff, and data is updated at least twice per year and therefore may not always be exactly up to date. And in the future, staff is hopeful that data updates can be automated and occur much more frequently. The next section is the approved legislative review projects. This shows rezonings and special use permits that have been approved. And it should be noted that there may be a variety of site plans, road plans, and subdivision plats associated with these approved rezonings, especially as many will be built out in phases over a long period of time. The site design review page shows administrative review projects and includes the proposed number of dwelling units. The page is for site plans and subdivision plats that are currently being reviewed but are not yet approved. The approved site design page shows projects that have final site plan or final plat approval, but have not yet started construction. And looking at this page, at least for the current data, I did not see any projects in the Village of Rivanna area. This page shows the units that have received final approval and are currently under construction. The table shows the maximum number of permitted units per the final approval, the units built so far, and the number of units remaining. The pie graph at the bottom of the page shows the total number of units built and remaining for all of the projects combined. And in Village of Rivanna, both Glenmore and Rivanna Village have areas under construction. The project and application page shows all applications and can be organized by CAC. It includes projects that have been approved, that are under review and under construction. And it includes an application number for each project, which can be used with County View to find all documents related to an application. And using County View and the application number, you can look up review comments, submittals, and staff reports. So I thought it would be a good chance to briefly review County View, which is available on the county's website. It allows members of the public to access applications that are under review, including site plans, subdivision plats, rezonings, and special use permits. Look up information by parcel ID, also known as the tax map parcel. And that's helpful if you want to see active applications on a specific property. Look up an application if you know the specific application number, including from the development dashboard page. And application numbers are based on the application type, the year it was submitted, and the order it was submitted. For example, SDP 2020-50 would be a site plan submitted in the year 2020 and would be the 50th site plan submitted that year. By application number, you can see the status of the application, which may be under review, deferred, or approved. You can see the name of the project, when it was submitted, and the legal ad if there is one. And you can click on related documents to access files related to the application. These would include review comments, submittals and resubmittals, staff reports, if any, and important correspondence or determinations. And once the project is approved, an approved plan would be uploaded to County View. Return to the last pages of the development dashboard. The employment uses page focuses on non-residential uses, including office, retail, and commercial. And I didn't see any employment uses currently for Village of Rivanna, although I expect there will be some as Rivanna Village starts developing. So please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
That's good.
And if there aren't any questions, we can also move on to the board and commission liaison updates as well.
Who's first? Is this where Rick and Donna give their reports? Okay.
Rick, if you'll go first, please.
Well, what I'd like to do is just update people that not everyone that is on the meeting right now was necessarily available when Kevin McDermott came in to talk with the CAC about highway projects within the area. And I want to read from the minutes of the Planning Commission on October 20th, which I had the good fortune to proofread for the Planning Commission, so I have it verbatim. And I just think this is important to get this information out. It's not actually within the Village of Rivanna, nor is it in the Scottsville district. It's in the Rivanna district, but it does affect motorists coming west in the morning, especially out of the Village of Rivanna and to the east. Mr. McDermott said A large upcoming project that will begin fairly soon is the diverging diamond at I-64 and Route 250 in Pantops. He said this interchange will be converted to a diverging diamond, which will allow those movements to operate with just 2 signals by switching the directions of traffic so that they cross over each other. Anyone not familiar with this is my comment now, not the minutes. All you have to do is go out to Zion Crossroads and get off of I-64, and you're experiencing a divergent diamond as you're crossing I-64. So I'll go back to the minutes now. He said then, one will never have to make lefts across traffic. He said this is both a safety and operations improvement for this heavily congested area, and the construction is expected to begin this winter. He said this is a smart scale project from a number of years ago, and that it was an $18 million project, which was the project with the most smart scale funding that has ever been awarded in the history of Albemarle County. And that is a significant amount of money for Albemarle, because usually under smart scale, we're talking $5 to $7 million as the highest ticket projects that we've dealt with in the past. Furthermore, Mr. McDermott said the US 250 Route 20 intersection improvements were the most recent smart scale approvals, which include adding some turn lanes and reconstructing the signals there. And while I was on the board, I expressed the concern that both of these projects could potentially occur simultaneously, which would ensure that there would be gridlock in the morning for anyone seeking to go down 250, basically east of the Shadwell interchange. He said, currently there are limitations on how many vehicles a green signal can be given because the number of lanes and the mast arms there cannot handle additional signal heads. He said this project will rebuild the intersection with some additional lanes. For a period of time, a roundabout was under discussion for this intersection, but the massive cost of inserting a roundabout there and the necessity to purchase commercial property frontage that VDOT would have probably drove that out of the realm of design, potential designs, and to the realm of really political impossibility. He also said that they will be closing some sidewalk gaps around the intersection and adding some turn lanes to this. He said that because the project was just awarded funding about a year and a half ago, construction will likely start in 2024 or 2025, and Pantops Double Diamond is due to be completed by 2023, if not 2022. I don't know whether they're doing incentive financing here as they did up 29 to try to get any of the subcontractors to finish the work early and providing added bonus financially if they do so. But anyhow, it's important to keep those deadlines in mind, that the Double Diamond will be starting this winter and that 250 and 20 will start somewhere around 2024 or 2025. So as one project gets completed, in all likelihood, we'll get a little pause, and then about a year later or thereabouts, maybe 18 months, the next project will begin. So that's the latest update on the transportation front. So I'll turn it over to Donna to tell you what the board has been up to. The Planning Commission tomorrow is talking about RIO 29 and form-based code, and that doesn't have immediate applicability to the Village of Rivanna CAC because there will be no further commercial development here. As you know, there's 40,000 square feet set aside in Rivanna Village, but form-based code would not apply to that. So over to Donna and the latest from the board.
Thank you, Rick. And, you know, I just want to, again, thank Rick for his many years of dedicated service, the expertise and knowledge that he brings from having served as a planning commissioner, then a member of the Board of Supervisors, and then back on the Planning Commission is absolutely invaluable to the county and to our residents. And I want to again publicly thank you for your many years of service and continuing to serve now. I will get to Breezy Hill, but there are a couple other things I want to mention first because I don't think they'll generate as much conversation. The first one is that Wednesday night, the board will be looking at our emergency ordinance, the one that Tori referenced in her opening remarks. It expires at midnight on the 18th. And so the board will be looking at it again. Candidly, prior to the last couple of weeks, I would say, in just general terms, the board was getting a lot of information and doing a lot of review in our individual supervisor capacities as to what we should do with regard to the ordinance. Would it be possible to relax some of the rules that we had imposed in terms of social distancing and things? And I don't know if anyone has had the opportunity to see the most recent edition of Seaville Tomorrow, but it shows a map of Virginia, and that map reflects that our region is literally the only place in the Commonwealth that is having any degree of success with the pandemic. Unfortunately, around the Commonwealth, around the nation, the pandemic numbers are spiking. And the governor just last week announced new constraints, which went into effect at midnight Sunday night. So I can only speak as this supervisor, but I would tell you that I do not anticipate that the Board of Supervisors is likely to relax any of the rules that we have imposed locally. Our county attorney, of course, is looking at it in terms of whether, the certain tightening that may take place. But as some of us were talking about before the meeting formally started, we are looking at a very, very major problem health-wise this winter. We are not even into December yet. December to February are the worst months of the year for the flu. Last year, the pandemic hit us at the end of the flu season, and it was not endemic within the population. Now we've got 11 million cases around the country. We're back up to nearly 200,000, new cases a day, 1,500 deaths a day. And so I think we need to do the best that we can to avoid pandemic fatigue, to be very careful. There is very promising news coming out from several domestic pharmaceutical companies on vaccines, but still everything I read is that while they appear to be substantially more successful than the average annual flu vaccine, it will likely not be before April that any vaccine will be widely available. So again, we just have to maintain our vigilance as we go through this year. One of the other things that I've noticed, and again, in sort of a general term, and there have been a number of news reports, is that residential property values seem to be both very stable and in some areas increasing. So that's good for the housing market. But what we've noticed is a lot of companies around the country are realizing that working remotely and virtually has not significantly reduced efficiency or economy. Just recently, State Farm announced that they are closing their call centers, one of which happens to be in Charlottesville, as companies are realizing that they can reduce their overhead by eliminating a lot of their commercial property. With that, I today sent a question to our county executive because, as you may be aware, we are just at the beginning of our discussions for next year's budget. And the question I asked was, is there a way that we can look to divert some of the money that we've been using towards economic development of businesses and try and move some of that money towards increasing the efficiency of our internet infrastructure and broadband? I don't have an answer to that question yet, but throughout the county, we are seeing more and more people who are working from home, whose children are going to school virtually, and good internet is as essential as electricity and water. So still more to come on that. The governor recently announced additional millions of dollars towards broadband. I'm very proud of the work that Rick, through his involvement in ABA, the Albemarle Broadband Authority, Mike Culp and the others have done. We've done very, very well with the annual body announcement of funds, but the reality is we need to do more. So those are some of the bigger issues outside of our local community there in Glenmore, the village of Rivanna. Turning to Breezy Hill, which I know is a topic on everyone's mind. As you know, back several months ago when that first came before the board, it appeared that it was going to be a 3-3 vote. If it was a 3-3 vote, it would have been a denial. The developer requested a deferral. And it's my understanding that historically the board has granted those deferrals. We've done it twice this year. That was one. Another one was up in the Rio district. The one in the Rio district is not coming back before the board. But as you know, Breezy Hill is. I moved when it first came back up for discussion to the Board of Supervisors that it go back through the Planning Commission. I did that because I value highly the expertise that Rick Randolph and the other members of the Planning Commission bring to this process. And I really look forward to their input to the board before it comes back up to the Board of Supervisors for a decision. I believe that this is coming up on the 24th of November to the Planning Commission.
Yes.
It's anticipated that it will come before the Board of Supervisors at our 16 December meeting. So as I'm sure many of you know, and other supervisors are continuing to receive emails and communications from our constituents. I encourage each of you to stay involved, follow closely what the Planning Commission does. I think that what we get from the Planning Commission will be very helpful for the board in reaching its decision. On Wednesday at our board meeting, I do plan on proposing a motion. I don't know exactly what the final terms of it will be, but let me give you a little bit of the background on why I'm going to propose the specific motion. A month or so ago, we changed the board's operating procedures as regards comments from the public for matters not on the agenda for a public hearing to place a limit of not more than 10 individuals for those items that are not for a hearing. Our county attorney has advised us that we are not required by law to schedule a new public hearing on the Breezy Hill resubmission. But I believe it's very important that both the applicant and our residents have an opportunity to express themselves. And so what I don't want to do is get into a situation where the board sort of in its broad discretion decides which items are so important that we should open up comment from the public to more than 10 people when it's not a hearing. So my motion will be to amend our board's operating procedures so that in a situation like this, where there is a deferral that comes back before the board, but a hearing is not required, that we provide additional time for the applicant and members of the public to be able to comment. Again, I don't know exactly the final details of how I plan on proposing that, but my reason for doing so is that I think it's important for the process and for the confidence that our public will have in the board making these sort of decisions, that when a matter has been deferred and comes back to the board and a hearing is not required, that we do provide that additional opportunity, more than just 10 people who may, they may want to talk about other items as well. So I want to give the public an opportunity to comment. What I would ask is that, assuming that this might be passed in some fashion, that individuals who make their public comment when this comes back before the board focus on specifics related to the revised submission and not necessarily maybe cover every single thing. Of course, what you say is completely up to you. I'm not trying to constrain anyone, but I think if we focus on the major issues, then it will help us to be efficient. So let me first say that. And if you want to have comments about that when we open up questions, I'll be happy to address that. Secondly, I want to talk specifically about Breezy Hill. As you know, very often, between the time that a developer or an applicant submits their initial application until it actually comes before the board, with some degree of frequency, there are changes, often substantial changes that take place. So we know now what the developer has submitted as a resubmission that's going to the Planning Commission. That may or may not be exactly what comes before the board. It may be after the Planning Commission, they make additional revisions. And so I think it's very important that everyone remain involved, both at the Planning Commission level and when it comes back to the board. And let's pay close attention to what, if any, additional revisions may take place. When it first came before the board, I think they were looking to develop about 160 houses, 165. Now I think it's 130.
200.
Well, oh, that's true. Yeah, the initial one was over 200. Then it dropped, I think, to about 160 or 65. Now it's 130. I don't know if there will be any other revisions, but my point is what is going before the Planning Commission may or may not be what finally comes before the board. So it's important to pay attention at both the Planning Commission and at the board. One of the items that receives a great deal of commentary from the public is the language in the master plan that, you know, there should be no further development until 250 is improved. I have some concerns about master plans having language that constrain Albemarle County from taking action in the absence of a constitutional or statutory requirement that is based upon another agency over which we have no control making a decision. And Albemarle County can't by itself improve 250. That's going to come through VDOT. Having said that, that's not to say that I am not cognizant of, nor that I am not paying attention to that language. But I just, as a general rule, I would tell you, it kind of bothers me that we would have something in our county plans that constrain us tied to another agency over which we don't have control. But it's in the master plan, and I will take that into consideration. Separate from, and in addition to the concerns over 250, and do have concerns over the capacity of 250, I have concerns over the total density. I have concerns over the distribution of the density within the resubmission. I have concerns over the outflow and inflow of traffic through Running Deer, because as we know from the last time this came before the board, VDOT made it very clear that there must be a second exit, and it will be through Running Deer. So I have those concerns. I have concerns over the proffer, whether it was adequate. I think it was 507, 509,000 last time. I have a lot of concerns with regard to this application. And so I do look forward to hearing from the Planning Commission, their review of it. I look forward to continuing to hear from residents who are going to be impacted on this. And I am concerned about the impact that additional growth will have on the capacity of 250. And as you know, Rick Randolph just mentioned, we've got two major projects that are coming online on 250. And it's just going to make things even more complex. So I share with you a lot of the concerns that I have over this application. But I will also tell you, as I do with everything that comes before the board, I don't make a final decision until all the evidence has been submitted, everyone has been heard, because otherwise I believe that I would not be upholding my obligation to provide fair hearings to everyone, particularly when property rights are involved. So that's where, you know, I kind of see things right now on Breezy Hill. I still have a lot of concerns. I appreciate the input that each of you have given to me, and the way you've helped to ensure that your voices are being heard. I think those were the areas that I wanted to cover for before opening the floor up to questions. Is again, I think on Wednesday night, our biggest item is the ordinance. That it looks like, I mean, I would anticipate we're clearly likely to continue the ordinance. I don't know at this point if there may be any suggested revisions for that. So with that, I'll open up to questions, and Corey, kind of leave it to you to kind of coordinate or be the moderator on that.
Thank you.
I'd like to say I understand your concerns about Albemarle County entering into things in language in the master plan that they have no control over because another agency is involved, like VDOT and all that. I'd like to point out that the county signed off on all this. And yeah, we had a lot of county input when we created the master plan. And I understand what you're saying, but that's how it came about.
And thank you, Dottie. I appreciate that. And I do understand the process. I just wanted to let people know, I don't see a benefit of the county constraining ourselves based upon decisions of agencies over which we have no control. Having said that, it's in the master plan. I will respect it being in the master plan. But I just have to candidly say, the more I've looked into this and reviewed it, I mean, that'd be like saying, we're not going to do anything until Fluvanna County does something. And I just don't think that's what we should be doing. I think we should make the decisions based upon what Albemarle County can do. Obviously, there are some exceptions. If it's a constitutional or a statutory obligation, we have no choice. For example, I believe we're obligated to put a certain amount of money aside for water treatment based upon a state law. So we don't have any choice in those situations. Thank you, Dottie. I do appreciate it. And I do recognize there was a process and the county did sign off on it.
Long process. Tori, you just put something out about raising your hand. I don't see a raise hand thing. What would it look like?
Oh, sure. Or you can put in the chat if you would like to ask a question. I was trying to give people an option who have their cameras turned off. I thought that might be easier.
Oh, okay.
But if you open the participants tab down at the bottom, there should be a raise hand button in the bottom right corner. But if it's easier to put in the chat too, people can also jump in if they want.
Well, now I lost you.
Oh, I see. Anne raised her hand.
I found it magic. Yeah. So yeah, I deduced from your conversation that probably Breezy Hill could argue that the limitations of our trying to limit usage of US 250 would not hold up legally, frankly.
Well, yeah, thank you, Ann. And what I have been informed by our county attorney and through county staff is that is not a obligatory phrase in the master plan. It is guidance. So,
What do you mean ligatory?
I'm sorry?
Oh, what do you mean it's not obligatory? I mean, it's
Obligatory. It is not something that the county is bound to. It's more advisory. And I think there are a lot of things that and Rick may be able to, not to throw this on you, Rick, but Rick with his experience may be able to expand a little bit upon that. There are many things in the, small area plans, master plans, and the comprehensive plans that are guidance. But as you know, and as Tori showed in her presentation, the slides, anytime there's a zoning map amendment or a special use or a special exception, that is going outside of what the current, zoning may be. And that happens with a great deal of frequency. Every homestay that comes up where someone needs a waiver to the 125 foot from a boundary line, those are legislative exceptions that are made. And so my understanding is that the language in the master plan does not obligate the county to deny any development until 250 is improved, but it is advisory language. I think that's the best terminology that I can come up with.
Yeah, I could see that Breezy Hill could argue that the increase in traffic in the future is not going to be only due to them, but it's going to be due to Louisa and Fluvanna County.
Well, and that's true. And I think that would apply in every situation. And it is sort of the balancing that I think the board or any legislative body or the planning commission has to look at. How much of the responsibility for the impacts of growth do you place upon a single developer as opposed to the totality of it. You know, one of the major issues that comes up, particularly with transportation, is do we give a pass, so to speak, to the first developer and then not allow any other developer to ever build anything because the first 100 cars maybe a day didn't impact the traffic, but when you do 100 plus 100 plus 100 plus 100, and so it really does get somewhat complex in trying to reach a lot of these decisions out there. You know, again, I still have a lot of concerns about this proposal, so I don't want, you know, my statement about the issue I have with master plan language that would constrain us to be taken to exclude the concerns I have about the impact on 250. As I mentioned, that's only one of the concerns that I see. I see the total density. I see concerns about where the density within Breezy Hill would be. This board meeting, when this came up, I kind of used the bell curve as an example that the highest development, as I understand it, should be in the village of Rivanna. And then as you move to the east, the property between the village of Rivanna and Carroll Creek should have a lesser degree of density, but higher than the property between Carroll Creek and Running Deer. That should be less than west of Carroll Creek. And then the lowest density becomes on Running Deer. And then to the east of Running Deer is the rural area that will not have development. And I think we're fortunate that we've got limestone farm out there, which I understand is under a conservation easement, so that will reduce further development that way. So that the highest development should be in the center. But within that, even if you got to the right density overall within Breezy Hill, my belief is that the greater density within Breezy Hill should be to the west towards Carroll Creek, and the lesser density within Breezy Hill should be to the east towards Running Deer. What I don't think would work would be to take all of your density and put it right on the property next to that is on Running Deer. That just doesn't match. The other thing that came up last time, which I still have concerns with, is when all of this area was initially identified for development and the total number of anticipated units that could be built had been calculated. Subsequent to that, the total number in the village of Rivanna, as I understand, was reduced by a substantial number. Well, just because that was reduced does not mean to me that you can take that reduction and throw it in over, for example, in Breezy Hill. That makes no sense at all. That totally skews the whole concept of the highest development being at Rivanna. You work your way out towards Running Deer. And for those people who live on Running Deer, I am very concerned about what the traffic flow is going to be for people who live in Breezy Hill. We have to have that open. VDOT has said you have to, and that's whether it's this proposal or any development of Breezy Hill. There has to be an outlet at Running Deer, but Running Deer shouldn't become the merge lane for people coming out of Breezy Hill to get onto 250. So it's all of these things in total that have to be evaluated when this proposal in its final form comes before the board. And I guess the last thing I'd say is I do not anticipate that the board would again grant a deferral if it happened to be a 3-3 hearing vote, that this will be this applicant's, final opportunity to come before the board. And again, those who have been involved in this for longer periods of time than I have, which has only been 10.5 months, I welcome your comments on any of this.
If I could just echo what Donna just said, I mentioned that tomorrow night the Planning Commission is going to be taking on form-based code for Rio, which is north and south of Rio and east and west of 29. And in that plan, if you tune in tomorrow night to it, we will have a discussion about the fact that 3 different zones, even though this is not zoning as in actual zoning, there were 3 character areas, as they're called, but you can really call them a zone, are proposed in the regulating plan. The first is core, the second is flex, and the third is the edge. And as you move from the core out to the edge, density and intensity of use declines. It's just a central planning concept that you want to concentrate density in one location as much as possible and let the periphery then have lower density, which is more suitable for open space and for residential growth. And here, as Donna has very clearly explained, you have a proposal that seeks to justify itself by intensifying density in exactly what is the edge of the village of Rivanna. Out in the periphery, there would be much more intensive land utilization than was ever proposed originally for this site. So that really, from a planning standpoint, is the central issue before us in a week from today.
I
Thank
just
you, Rick.
said, as Donna, certainly as you have said, and Rick has said, that's exactly what the master plan says. That the density should be from the middle out, and what they are proposing is to pack it all on the edge. So we're all in agreement.
Yeah, I think we are.
Yes.
And again, I feel like I'm going to repeat myself, but I will again. It's not that I don't agree with the concern over the capacity of 250. I was simply saying, I just don't think we should put in our plans things that constrain us to someone else's decision. I think that's what we in the county should be able to make our decisions on.
Sure.
Looks like Dennis has his hand raised.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, there's a little bit
Okay.
of an echo, Dennis, but we can hear you.
I want to center on the word essential. That's in the master plan regarding traffic, regarding the constraint upon development unless 250 is enlarged. I think the word essential is a very unusual word that you will find in these kind of documents. And it's a very strong word. In fact, it's the strongest word you can use. And I think that the word essential, as I recall in dealing with the master plan that I was a participant in, is that there's a recognition by the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors that we had a horrendous situation with regard to traffic. Now, I agree, Donna, that it's touchy when you get into situations where we have no control over what VDOT does and what we do. But I think that there's no constraint upon the county and the Board of Supervisors saying, if we have a situation in which traffic is very bad and further development will make it even worse, that there's no reason why the Board of Supervisors can exercise what control it does have, which is not to allow or to restrain further development, especially at the edge of the county, from going on until this situation is solved. I refer you again to Adelaide. The Adelaide development, which was at the edge of Crozet, at the edge of that road, the edge of the development, was denied primarily because of the effect on traffic on 250 would have on that development. And that was a decision the Board of Supervisors made, even though the Planning Commission approved it. So I think you should keep that in mind. I
Dennis, I
understand.
agree.
I understand. So I understand what you're saying, but there is precedent for doing this.
No, I agree, Dennis. Again, I'm differentiating between the language that constrains us based upon another entity versus the theme behind the language. And if I recall, the one thing I think I would just question is, my recollection is it says, I thought it said until 250 is improved, not necessarily enlarged. Now, how it's improved is, something that I guess it could be enlarged. It could be a number of different things. But I agree with the theme behind the language. It was simply the part about us being constrained by another entity over which we have no control. But I disagree.
Well, I hear you, Donna, but it does more than just saying improved. It designates and specifies different projects in the master plan that must be done before any other development is allowed. Now, the
I'm not
fact,
just,
okay, well, the fact that 250 is only constrained by money and is still on the list for VDOT doesn't mean that it doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't
No, I
mean it's
agree.
impractical. And I think that should be taken into consideration. That's all I'm saying.
oh, and absolutely. I totally agree with you, Dennis.
Okay.
I'd like to add that you mentioned I know one of the arguments the developers have used is that Rivanna Village was originally scheduled for a higher number. They built a lower number. Well, the higher number was not a realistic number, which is one of the reasons why it got thrown out. And when the present developers purchased the land, what they realized was that they could not have any kind of quality if they went by those numbers. They were also, the original plan, as I recall, they were doing things that you can't do, like running utilities under roads, which you cannot do in Albemarle County on public roads. And there were a few other things. Dennis, you probably know more about it. So the fact that they had 700 some odd homes that were scheduled, or units that were scheduled, was really, they were building on wetlands. I mean, there was all kinds of things that they were doing that was not. So that is not a very fair number to be arguing against, I mean, I know it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, I'm with you, Dottie.
Yeah,
And
okay.
frankly, to me, it wouldn't matter why the number of units in the village of Rivanna was reduced. To me, that still does not justify increasing in either the property between Village of Rivanna or Carroll Creek to Running Deer, the Breezy Hill proposal. You still have to have, this bell curve stepped, however you want to describe it, where it's not just the total density, but it's the density within each of those component parts. And that as you go from west to east, the density should continually be reduced.
Right.
I would like to say something else. Can you still hear me? Am I still on?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
Dennis.
My biggest concern over and above what I just said is that the proposal violates 5 different aspects of the master plan. And I have outlined those in a letter to the Planning Commission I've sent today. And when 5 different aspects of the master plan are disregarded, one has to decide, is it more important to fill the rest of the development area than it is to abide by a master plan, which people relied on when they moved here, when they continue to live here, and which guide their quality of life. And the result of it might be that the master plan has no meaning anymore. And what really concerns me again is that we're up for a revision of the master plan, a review of it, and who's going to participate in it when they feel that it has no meaning.
I totally agree, Dennis. To me, the process is the important thing.
Right.
We have to have a process. And that's why, at the beginning, when I talked about the motion I plan on bringing up, because I want to make sure that there is a process that allows for example, this particular situation of a deferral coming up. It makes it much less subject to arbitrary or capricious discretion. So there should be a process, and the process should be followed.
I agree.
Can I say something?
Please.
Hello. I asked Donna about this earlier, that constraint they're supposed to be writing into block, the block with the 21 acres, that it can only be one unit of residential unit in there. And it says with a, they're gonna write something in there in favor of the Breezy Hill HOA. Do we know anything more about what that means?
I wrote an email to our county attorney earlier today, about that specific point. And I said, you know, I still don't have a good understanding of what exactly that will provide and how enforceable and how long lasting it will be. And again, my email went out earlier today. I don't believe I've gotten an answer. I've been in 3 meetings. This is the last one in succession, so I haven't really had a chance to look to see, but I do expect to have an answer on that well before this comes back before the Board of Supervisors. And so hopefully we will have an answer for that.
Okay. Now on the subject, to grind this axe more, on the subject of the, you know, the road, the specific road improvements, which included 4-laning 250 from either Milton or Glenmore Way, depending on where you're reading, to the Shadwell interchange of 64. That's, you know, it's essential in the master plan that that be done first. The point to me was that the county created the Village of Rivanna development area, saying that this would allow the county to provide infrastructure for development rather than having development scattered all over the county.
Right.
And it didn't happen. And the development area, the road leading to the development area, which is the only road, is inadequate.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's in there. It's saying, you know, saying we intend to do what we said we were going to do before we make them dig the hole deeper. You know, we're gonna.
That's a great point, Neil.
That
really
to me
is
is
a
what
great point.
what the county was saying.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And, you know, when I drive through that area and you go over the railroad bridge and you just have to shake your head and scratch your head and say, why the heck did we allow this to be built at this size rather than larger? Because now, you know, that constrains some of the expansion capability on 250. But I think you made an excellent point. The county basically made a promise to the people who live in that area that by turning it into a development area, the county would support the infrastructure improvements that would actually make it work. And that all ties in with the concerns that I have over this proposal. And it's a lot of different concerns. It's not just 250. It's the impact on the people in Running Deer. It's the proffer. It's the density within the development. It's all of those things.
And, you know, the village is supposed to, you know, it's totally dependent on commuting to Charlottesville because it's a village, so there's no employment opportunities there. So have we heard what's this current status of Rivanna Village? Is there going to be any commercial development? Have they had any luck getting any commercial tenants in there?
I am not aware of it. I would say right now, commercial expansion is pretty difficult in the economic pandemic.
Well, that's true too.
To answer your question, Neil, I would think Robertson Development would probably do the commercial development last. From a strategic standpoint, their return on investment is much greater to sell residential units as much as possible. They're not far away from where they would actually potentially be building the commercial development, but I suspect it will probably be the last phase of construction that will go in there, simply because in the meantime, people can get the amenities they want by driving west or driving east, hopping on I-64 and going to Zion Crossroads if you need Lowe's or Walmart. So I would think, and with COVID now, that's added incentive, as Donna has indicated, to delay until the last possible moment to make a decision on what they're going to put in there for the 40,000 square feet of commercial development.
Yeah, and I concur with Rick. And I look at, while I was just a resident, an observer, in the Norfolk area, there was a massive redevelopment called East Beach. And the commercial spaces were filled last. They were built last and filled last as much as possible, because until you have a sufficient volume of residents, you don't have the customers that can support the businesses. And so for a while, you had a lot of people who had to drive quite a distance to the grocery store, but no one was going to put a grocery store in until they had enough customers to be able to operate economically. Any other questions? It appears not. Tori, was this the last part of the meeting?
Pretty much, yes. The only other thing I was going to bring up, if anyone has any ideas at the moment, or you can email them to me separately for future agenda topics. The next meeting is scheduled for Monday, January 11th at 7 p.m. And at the next meeting, we should be able to hold elections for chair, vice chair, and secretary as well. I see some attendees here who have been on the CAC before. I'm not sure if they've all hit term limits or have any interest in asking to join again, but I believe the board is allowed to allow people to serve beyond term limits if the board chooses to. So I'll just put that out there as well.
Thank you, Tori. And I want to thank every person who I see here tonight, because you have each been so important and so involved in making your community a better place. Each of you in your own way and ways have really contributed. I'm thankful for each of you. I really want to thank Tori and other county staff for the work that they've done to try and revitalize the CAC. 24 November, Planning Commission, 16 December, the Board of Supervisors. Obviously, Breezy Hill is the topic of discussion right now in the area. And to each of you, I thank you for your comments. And Neil, again, I'm going to go back and say, I think you really laid out the foundation of the whole concern here. And that was that by establishing a development area out there, the county made promises that they would support the infrastructure. And that's where a lot of my concerns about this happen to be. So I thank you all for your participation, and I'll leave it up to Tori to tell us all good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Tori, you still there?
Yep.
Do you take care of reserving the firehouse? Should we not be out of COVID? We probably won't be, but you take care of all that?
I would normally, yes. So fingers crossed when it's safe to do so again, I'll definitely start those reservations.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't personally anticipate, in the absence of really good news, that we're going to be there before spring.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for your involvement, your participation, and your community service. It really, it's what drew me to this area. I've never lived anywhere where there are as many people involved in making it a better place. So I thank you all for what you're doing to participate in that.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Night, everyone.
Night.